How's it going, everybody? My name is JustJarrod, but you can just call me Jared, your one-stop shop for legendary loot news, and today we've got a doozy. The pinnacle of hack-and-slash games, Diablo. That's right, we are going to be talking about everything we know about the loot in Diablo IV, the next iteration of the epic ARPG series that started it all. Diablo IV was announced at Blizzcon 2019. They showed off a beautiful cinematic trailer that revealed the return of Lilith, daughter of Mephisto, and their return to darkness theme. Then, to everyone's surprise, you could play the game. Actually play Diablo IV at BlizzCon just like that. So from that, as you could expect, we got tons of new info on Diablo IV. Most importantly though, we got tons of info on loot. That's what we're here for, so without further ado, here's everything we know about the loot in Diablo IV. Stay a while and listen. First off, to shorten the length of this video because there are a lot of details here to go over, I'm just going to make a bulleted list and rattle off everything. That way this video isn't 35 minutes long. I'll break down the things that needs to be explained, but most of the stuff is self-explanatory. Let's begin. The rarity tiers in Diablo IV are white common items, blue magic items, yellow rare items, legendary and set, orange and green items, and then a brand new rarity called mythic, which is red in color. Legendary and set gear are on the same playing field now. Blizzard is shying away from the set build trap that they fell into with Diablo 3's Endgame, where the best builds are those defined by sets that are created by the devs. In Diablo 4, they want to introduce more build diversity, so this time around, legendaries are being tweaked, sets are more of an introduction to endgame builds and how to play classes. Yellow items will still be viable in endgame, and they are introducing the mythic rarity. We'll break down these changes in more detail in a few seconds. The gear slots in Diablo 4 are as follows: helmet, chest, gloves, pants, boots, amulet, 2 rings, on-hand, off-hand, and an extra 2 weapon slots for Barbarians for a total of 4. The shoulder armor slot has been removed for visual reasons. Blizzard wants the chest pieces to stand out more and be visually more appealing, so they opted to remove the shoulder gear slot from the game. And yes, Barbarians can carry 4 total weapons. They have 2 slots for 2 one-handed weapons, and 2 more slots for 2 two-handed weapons. You can switch between each weapon on the fly. My god, my Barb from Diablo 2 would be so happy. Barb fan for life. The attack and defense affixes can no longer be found on items that don't make sense for them to be on. Attack can only be found on weapons now, and defense can only be found on armor, while jewelry has neither attack nor defense. Solely picking your items based on attack and defense will almost never be the optimal way to play, but it does provide a good starting point for newer players. The strength, dexterity, and intelligence stats are gone and being replaced by one thing: power. There are tons of other affix-related changes Blizzard has made or is thinking about adjusting. Here's the affixes segment of the video. There's a lot. In Diablo 3, affixes were more so tailored towards the very specific builds, and the perfect item would vary depending on whichever build you were pursuing. They want to change this so nothing's so specific. Instead of the sets they create being the only viable builds, they want you to come up with your own builds and have them be viable for any endgame challenge. These affix changes play a major role in that adjustment. Blizzard realizes that affixes are meaningful parts of character power, and they want to create interesting choices when deciding which items to equip. With this being said, they are increasing the total number of affixes on magic, rare, and legendary items to raise the overall importance of non-legendary affixes. They will also be adding 3 new stats to the game: angelic power, demonic power, and ancestral power. Angelic power increases the duration of all beneficial effects, like self-buffs or healing. Demonic power increases the duration of all negative effects, like debuffs or damage over time. And ancestral power, which increases the chance of on-hit effects, aka increased proc chance. Now I'll read a segment directly from the official Diablo IV blog, explaining the reasoning behind these new stats. These new stats can appear as affixes, such as plus 15 to angelic power. We want these new stats to also act as prerequisites for empowering certain other affixes. If you don't have enough of a specific power, you can still equip the item, but you may not benefit from an affix linked to that power. We think these changes will address those two main takeaways pretty well. Legendary powers should no longer completely dwarf the strength of your affixes, and affixes themselves provide more interesting choices because their strength depends on how much of the relevant powers you've accumulated on the rest of your gear. You might find an amulet with the perfect stats for your build, but some of its affixes may require demonic power when you've previously focused on ancestral. Maybe your current amulet is the primary source of your ancestral power, so equipping a new amulet would mean potentially making sacrifices elsewhere. With this system, it will be easy to identify items with good stats, but it will take some thought and planning to decide whether the item is good for your build. The best items for your character will really depend on what you currently have and how you've built that character, making it more difficult to just look up the answer online. At the same time, we think this system keeps items approachable even if you make suboptimal itemization decisions. You may be weaker, but doing so won't completely break your character. We can also introduce this mechanic gradually and naturally as you level, rather than making it a requirement to understand at the beginning. My opinions on this are for the most part positive. This new system gives Diablo more depth, which it desperately needs, but it comes with the worry that this new system, if implemented poorly, could end up just becoming what it's out to replace, the strength, dexterity, intelligence system. If at endgame, to use certain items or to complete a certain build you're going for, if you just need all angelic power, then you're just going to equip things with angelic power, and this whole cycle repeats itself. Different builds or different sets of items would have to have different splits of angelic, demonic, and ancestral requirements. That way you're able to mix and match items with various affixes instead of just feeling like you have to pile on one power over the other two. That would be the best case scenario in my opinion. Moving on, I forgot to mention that ancient legendaries are being removed from the game completely after fan feedback. Instead, what they're doing is really cool. In Diablo IV, they will be introducing a new type of consumable, which is still unnamed, that will only drop in the late endgame and will have one random legendary affix tied to it. This consumable can then be used on any non-legendary item to apply that legendary affix to said item. This is a huge change that has the potential to make yellow rare items way more viable, which is what Blizzard aims to do. This way, rare items with good affixes on them will always be handy to hang onto and be important options in your builds. On to legendaries. What's changing? Like I said earlier, legendaries will be as or more powerful than set items, and sets will more so be introductory ways to play certain classes, and no longer will they dominate the build creation. Legendaries will be the new primary way for build diversity, and in Diablo IV, legendaries will change specific skills instead of just buffing damage. Legendaries will also not rain from the sky in Diablo IV, thank the heavens. I can't wait for legendaries to actually be rare again. This time, the further you are in the game, the better loot will drop. Not more loot, but better loot. Blizzard said that they want to create as many legendaries as possible and are open to taking community legendary ideas from the community for future legendaries after the game has released, which is pretty neat. Also, they're thinking more creatively about legendaries, for example, a legendary that will do something when your character is soaked in blood. Let's talk about mythics, the new rarity. It's red. Each mythic item has count 'em, 4 legendary affixes, but you can only have one equipped at a time. That's all we know about mythic items, but I'm always down for more rarities. Gems will be returning, obviously. They work how you'd expect, and runes are returning, which is epic. I loved the rune system in Diablo 2, but this time it's a tad bit different. There are 2 types of runes in Diablo 4. There are condition runes and effect runes. First, you socket a condition rune, then you socket an effect rune. A condition rune could say something like, when you are stunned or frozen, then something happens. That something is the effect rune, which could be something like gain 500 barrier damage. So the full rune perk would read, when you are stunned or frozen, gain 500 barrier damage. It's interesting for sure. I'm excited to see how that kind of plays out in the full game and what kind of combinations are possible. Blizzard also said that upgrading runes might be a possibility, but they aren't sure yet. Trading will be a thing in Diablo IV. There is no auction house, but there is trading, but not full trading. There will be 3 types of tradable items. Items you can always trade, items you can only trade once, then they are bound to the account they're traded to, and items you can't trade at all. The most powerful items can't be traded at all. Item crafting and item modification will be important in the endgame. To find certain crafting materials, you'll have to go to specific places in the game or kill specific enemies. They want the crafting materials to be fully part of the open world, meaning you have to go somewhere to get something versus just destroying endless hordes of enemies and hoping that the one material you need out of hundreds will finally drop. And the devs want it to be worth it for you to take the time to search out these certain crafting materials. The Heraldric Cube, or something like it, may return in Diablo IV. There will be endgame keys you can find whilst you're in endgame that let you upgrade a dungeon. What dungeon depends on the key, but once upgraded, this dungeon becomes an endgame dungeon. These keys add affixes to the dungeon to increase its difficulty, and the further you get into one of these dungeons, the harder it becomes and the better loot you'll obtain. Affixes on dungeon keys allow you to pre-plan for the dungeon. Since it's a specific dungeon, you'll know what to expect if you've been in it before, enemies, etc. I love the idea of equipping certain gear to fight certain enemies or having a certain build for a certain endgame dungeon. Pretty sweet. Endgame progression post max level is still under works, but Blizzard doesn't want a copy of the Paragon system from Diablo III, which is basically just more and more power and not interesting at all, and is the main reason for power creep in Diablo III. This last segment of the video is for miscellaneous loot info that I'll blast through super quick. Let's do it. The open world is so large that they've introduced mounts to Diablo. Mounts can be customized both visually and with gear. Magic Find and Gold Find will only be found via gems. You have your own instance loot. Others won't see your loot until you drop it on the ground. Item gambling is returning and it will be a gold sink. Charms from Diablo 2 are not in the works because the devs don't think it's fun to sacrifice inventory space for them. Microtransactions were implied by the devs, but they promised you can't pay for power. Seasons will be a thing. Seasons will bring new legendaries and items into the game to shake up builds and introduce more builds. Blizzard is internally discussing having farmable items that drop from specific monsters or bosses, but they don't want to lose that feeling of getting a super awesome legendary out of a barrel if you're lucky enough. There will be 5 classes in the full version of the game. The Barbarian, Sorceress, and Druid have all been revealed so far. There will be more character customization. Dungeons are randomly generated and have specific events. They aim to have over 100 dungeons. Diablo IV has a non-linear campaign with an open, continuous world. It will be releasing on PC, PS4, and Xbox One. Also, a next-gen console release is pretty obvious as Diablo IV isn't coming soon, not even Blizzard soon. And finally, most importantly, Blizzard is taking Diablo back to darkness. Return to darkness is the theme of Diablo IV. I wish they never left, but we're back, baby. And I do believe that about does it. That's all the info we have on the loot and gear in Diablo IV. If I missed anything, please let me know down in the comments. I tried my best to combine the 7 pages of info I had into something that didn't take up your entire afternoon, so hopefully you enjoyed this or learned anything from it. It's honestly so weird that I'm making a Diablo IV video. About 13 years ago, I played Diablo 2 for the first time and absolutely fell in love with the game and the ARPG genre. Diablo 2 was my first taste of hack and slash, and here I am now, covering it on YouTube all this time later. Crazy. Anyways, come check me out on Twitter for more loot news and just general loot stuff. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, a positive rating is greatly appreciated as it helps get the video out to more people, and consider subscribing for more epic loot news on Diablo 4. Until next time, have a legendary day, night, afternoon. Peace out.